Ah, the Serpents, master of immortality, destroyers of grace, and honestly, the worst guest you could ever have over for dinner. Hello fellow Tarnished, in this video we're going to uncover the real reason why the Serpent is massive threat to the Golden Order and considered blasphemous, who exactly that monstrous snake at the bottom of Volcano Manor is, and most importantly, why is he there? And of course we'll break down what's really going on with the Serpents tangled up in Messmer. So let's get started with the gold, basically the main topic in Elden Ring. Gold is everywhere in the lands between. And ultimately, it's the center of our adventure, the Elden Ring itself, which defines the Golden Order. If you watched my latest video about the shamans and Marika and everything she did to them, you'll already have a pretty good idea of why gold is so important to her. But for a quick recap, gold in Elden Ring is tied to life, protection, and healing. We know this from key items like the Golden Order incantations, which restore HP and heal, and there's also Marika's secret incantation, the Manor Earth Tree, which creates a small illusory earth tree that continually restores life. So, the Golden Order, which is Marika's personal take on order, is built on manipulating and mastering this power of gold. But before we move on, if you want to hear me blabbing more about Elden Ring lore, just hit the subscribe button. It's quicker than getting swallowed by a god-devouring serpent and way less painful. Plus, it helps me out way more than you think. Anyway, now that we got a clear understanding of Marika's vision, her obsession with gold, and what she did with it, let's turn our attention to the Serpent. We know the Serpent is considered blasphemous in the Golden Order. It's called a god-devouring serpent, and we've been told this many times. But why exactly is it considered blasphemous? Sure, it devours gods, but is that really all that there is to it? As usual with Elden Ring, there's much more beneath the surface. And while we got plenty of evidence across the lands between to back this theory, which I'll dive into shortly, things really start to click once we meet Messmer, the poor abandoned pup who literally set the world on fire, all for his old dear mum. It's both cute and terrifying at the same time. Right, so let's talk about Messmer. Sure, he's linked to serpents, we all know that by now, and he's tied to fire too. He's also a bit of a psycho and an hypocrite, but let's be honest, it's probably not entirely his fault. Let's dig into why. First, let's start with this item, Helm of Khud, captain of the Fire Knights. It tells us that the winged serpent is the token creature of Messmer's military forces. It is a wise friend which keeps the base serpent at bay and holds his power in check. Here we learn that the winged serpent associated with Messmer is actually kinda good, wise even, a friend that keeps the base serpent under control, which is apparently a completely different and separate serpent. Now, if you're thinking this sounds like a parallel to Godfrey and Serosh, you're probably right, but that's definitely a topic for another video, so I'll leave that aside for now. Still, it's an interesting parallel, don't you think? Moving on. Anyway, when we meet Messmer for the first time, he's wrapped in snakes, specifically 2 snakes with wings. These should be the good guys. Let's get to know them. The Black Helm of Messmer tells us that his helm is crowned with 2 intertwined winged serpents. It goes on to say that the winged snakes were Messmer's constant companions. They were there when the base serpent was sealed away behind his eye, they were there through his eternity of suffering, and they will accompany him yet in his hideous form, born when he destroyed the grace granted by his mother. They have accepted his fate as much as he has. Alright, we got 3 key pieces of info here. First, Messmer is basically best buds with these 2 winged serpents. They seem decent, not necessarily a threat. Then we hear about a 3rd serpent, the base serpent, which was sealed away. Now, this one sounds bad, definitely not a friend. And lastly, the big bombshell, his hideous new form, born when he destroyed the grace granted by his mother. Wait, what? Messmer destroyed his grace? That can't be right. Messmer greets us by questioning how his mother could trust in someone so devoid of grace. His whole crusade was about purging the graceless. His beloved mother gave him grace, why would he destroy it? Surely we're reading this wrong, or are we? Well, let's explore the facts. We know that Messmer was really close to his mother. The black armor of Messmer the Impaler tells us on his mother's wishes, Messmer made himself a symbol of fear, undertaking the cleansing crusade she desired. And then there's this: direct thy maleditions, thine ire, and thy grief towards me alone. From this, we learn that Messmer obeyed his mother completely. He ran an entire crusade for her. Let's stop a second here. This is not just like, yes, mom, I'm popping to the shop for you. He literally burned down the world for his mom. And he was even willing to take the blame for her actions, telling people to direct all their anger and grief towards him. From this, we see clearly that Messmer loved his mother and would have done anything for her. And so he wouldn't have really willingly destroyed his grace. So what's really going on here? There's only one possible explanation. The base Serpent destroyed his grace, not Messmer. And it's likely for this reason that his mother Marika sealed him away. This is probably the root of Marika's fear of serpents. The remembrance of the Impaler tells us that a malevolent snake writhed within Messmer, and so his very mother plucked out his eye, thanks mom, and put in its place a seal of grace. Yet, having done so, her fear compelled her to secret away her child within the realm of shadow. Right. Messmer is a fascinating figure in our quest to understand why Marika considers the serpent blasphemous. He's definitely a crucial starting point. But let's put aside Messmer's personal tragedies and his Oedipo complex for a moment and focus on the serpent. The serpent destroyed Messmer's great, his gold. This means that serpent consumes gold. Now, as for how the serpent got into Messmer, that's a whole other theory and the topic of the other video in this series where I dive into Marika's children and their affliction, but for now all you need to know is that there's also an evil serpent inside Messmer and it's capable of consuming gold. Now, this brings us nicely to another serpent we all know a bit better, Rykard's serpent, or rather the god-devouring serpent. How does this link to Messmer's story? Well, just like Messmer's serpent, Rykard's serpent is also consuming gold. How do we know this? It's never spelled out black and white, but if we dig a little deeper, there are some very interesting clues. First, let's look at what the serpent does. Both the serpent and later Rykard himself devour heroes. We are told this by Rykard's rancor, which states, "These spirits manifest from the rancor of heroes who met a violent end. The Lord granted them an audience, whereupon they were welcomed by the maw of the great serpent, and within the serpent bowels they became the Lord's kin." This is particularly unsettling because it mirrors our own story when we join Volcano Manor. We are tasked with hunting down other tarnished, thinking we are rising in Rykard's favor, when in reality we're just gourmet food being prepared for the serpent, and we trotted along willingly, not realizing what was waiting for us on the other side. Don't worry though, we take care of the serpent too, we think. But yeah, the serpent's purpose is to eat heroes, and why heroes specifically? Well, if we look at the description of the hero's rune, it tells us that it's the grace that dwells within the inhabitants of the lands between, the lingering residue of gold. There were once heroes who walked the battlefields abundantly blessed by the earth tree itself. So, yes, this serpent is hunting for gold. It needs to eat gold to sustain itself. Just like Messmer's serpent devoured this grace, this one is feeding on grace, the lingering residue of gold. But why gold? Well, that's because gold represents life. I've covered this more in depth in my other video about the shamans, but gold in Elden Ring produces life, healing, and protection. This explains why the serpent feeds on it. It's trying to sustain itself. The serpent is said to be an ancient deity from a forgotten religion, and the serpent hunter weapon description tells us, weapon thought to have been used to hunt an immortal great serpent in the distant past. So, yes, the serpent is immortal, and what grants eternal life in this world? Gold. Now, here's the problem. Marika controls gold. She's collected it, condensed it, and created their own life-only order. She's the one in charge of life and bestows it through the sap of the earth tree, which is gold. So, well, the serpent is a bit of a problem for her. The serpent already freaked her out when he was messing with Messmer, snacking on her son's grace. Now she's got another serpent capable of consuming gold. And not just gold, but immortal gods too. This creature could essentially destroy her golden order and the entirety of life in the lands between. And so yes, here we have our answer for why the serpent is considered blasphemous. It's not just some random godly tantrum. We have a creature that can destroy gold, consuming it to sustain itself and keep its immortality. That means it could destroy everything Marika built. In simpler terms, the serpent is eating the power of life to gain more power for itself and become even more immortal. Pretty freaky, right? I think I'm with Marika on this one. Calling this guy blasphemous seems totally fair. So, considering that at one point, and even still to some extent today, grace, and by extension gold, was present within every creature in the land between, it makes sense that under Marika's reign, anything connected to the serpent was banished. The Colosseum's gladiators, for example, who wore garments decorated with snakes, were said to have suffered as the audience delighted in seeing these bronze effigies beaten and battered. In short, Marika made sure that everything related to the serpent was considered blasphemous and was thoroughly banished from her order in the lands between. Now, let's take a quick moment to talk about the serpents and where they might have originally come from. I won't go into too many details here since that's a whole other video, but let's just touch on a few points. Marika was likely created in a jar, mixed with a bunch of, well, other things. Most of her children, born from herself alone, like Melina, Messmer, Michaela, and Malenia, were born afflicted, and with some pretty impressive powers. Given that some of their affliction can be linked to other gods, it's reasonable to assume that in the jar with Marika were fragments of other gods. Now, the serpent is also described as an ancient god, and the serpent is also said to be immortal. So, who's to say that the serpent wasn't part of the jar ritual, and maybe Marika passed those serpentine genes onto poor Messmer? The serpent took over, and she had no choice but to seal him away. But what happened to the original immortal serpent? I think it's what came out of the mega jar that Marika originally stuffed with all the spirited away shamans. The serpent, having gold in him because he was consuming gold, was put in the mix too with all the shamans, and the thing we see in the video is indeed a serpent, mixed maybe with shamans. But if the serpent is indeed immortal and he came out of the jar ritual, he must still be around somewhere, right? And so, once we lay out this picture and realize there was once an ancient immortal serpent god that disappeared but had the ability to consume gold to sustain its immortality, it's not hard to connect the dots and say that this missing serpent god is the one we see today in Mount Kelmir, now hanging out with Rykard. Mount Kelmir is a prison, but it's also a place of serpent worship, as we see in the church at the Volcano Manor, where the godskin noble is found. What's interesting is that in this place, they seem to venerate a winged serpent. You see those decorations all over the place? But down in the basement, you find the evil serpent instead. This is a little confusing, but what if in this church they were worshipping a good serpent capable of keeping the evil serpent at bay? It wouldn't be that crazy considering many religions have this kind of duality, good versus evil, holy versus blasphemous, so it's possible that the two serpents were venerated in antithesis to each other. In this specific church, the good winged serpent might have been the one worshipped, but now what do we find here? A godskin apostle and the remains of what is clearly the evil serpent. We'll get back to this in a moment, but now let's consider how finding the god-devouring serpent, the one that Rykard merges with, is no easy task. You have to navigate the labyrinth of Volcano Manor to find it, and it's hidden away in the deepest depths, making it incredibly inaccessible. Now, Rykard, being praetor, was overseeing the operations of Volcano Manor. It's not far-fetched to think that his curious nature might have led him down the deepest parts of the manor, where he stumbled upon the serpent. As I've covered in another video, Rykard was already alienated with Marika and the Golden Order for various reasons we're all familiar with. So, when he found this serpent, he likely saw embracing this path of blasphemy as the ultimate middle finger to Marika and her precious Golden Order. The whole idea of devouring the gods might have tied back to the fact that the gods and demigods can carry more gold in them, and maybe it's just about eliminating the competition. And this opens up an interesting door when we think about the Glowmite Queen. What if she was working for the serpent, killing gods to feed their master? But hey, that's a story for another time, but still definitely some good food for thought now. But let's now talk about how we can link the serpent in Volcano Manor to Messmer. While they don't look exactly alike, they share some key similarities. Let's start with the more subtle ones. First, the embedded creatures. Messmer's serpent has eyes on him, and Rykard's serpent has bodies of human or, as we know, heroes inside him. To me, this symbolized that the serpents absorbed other creatures, and those creatures became visible on or within them. Second, both serpents show signs of shedding their skin. You can clearly see these in a few spots, especially if you check out Bonfire VN's videos, which has some great details on the characters and the elements in the game. Definitely worth checking out. Now, we find the serpent skin in Bonny Village and another skin hanging in Volcano Manor. Now, serpents shed their skin when they grow, usually after consuming enough food to grow larger. This suggests that at some point these serpents fed, most likely on gold, as we've kind of proven that's their comfort food, and grew so much that they shed their skin. Now, why are the serpent skins found specifically in Volcano Manor and Bonny Village? This is where the story gets very interesting. We know the serpent was fed gold and grew large enough to shed its skin. If we follow my theory from the other video where I explain how the shamans are a source of gold, it makes sense that the serpent may have been feeding near Bonny Village, where the shamans were taken to be killed. He probably had easy access to a lot of them, maybe even stealing them, and if you're wondering why I didn't go directly to the shaman village, well, remember the passage to shaman village was hidden, so feeding near Bonny Village might have been the serpent's best bet for an easy meal. Now, as for the skin in Volcano Manor, the story here takes a much darker turn. We know that the church was once dedicated to the winged serpent, a good, wise serpent, probably a fate that's long been lost. Like I mentioned earlier, I think the Glowmite Queen might have served or even been connected to the evil serpent we find in the basement of Volcano Manor. If this is true, we now have a godskin noble in the church, someone who served the Glowmite Queen and, by extension, the evil serpent. I believe this skin is an act of desecration by the godskin apostle. They placed the skin of the evil serpent where the church once worshipped the good winged serpent, defiling its meaning, essentially taking over. And why is the skin here? Well, I think the godskins were feeding the evil serpent in Volcano Manor basement, or at least they started doing so after the shattering or after Rykard found the serpent, basically as soon as the serpent took back some sort of power. And why is the serpent at the bottom of Volcano Manor? Well, we know the serpent is immortal, so it couldn't be killed. We know it's blasphemous because it can consume gold, and by doing so destroy lives. I think for all these reasons, Marika wasn't able to defeat it, so she had the serpent sealed away beneath Volcano Manor, which essentially is a prison. She didn't seal the serpent in the Land of Shadow, as that would have been too risky. It was too close to Messmer, who also had part of the serpent within him. But also, Marika would have had no control over the serpent there. She needed it somewhere she could keep it under control, in a prison far from everything, in a place almost impossible to reach. So the serpent, now weakened and no longer fed gold, was likely dying or the equivalent of dying for an immortal being. Then Rykard finds it. He brings the serpent back to some sort of its former glory by feeding it heroes and tarnished, probably the only ones left who still had a bit of gold in them, and so slowly the serpent becomes more powerful again. It desires to devour the gods, the original goal probably, and starts to resurface. But then we kill the serpent, right? Well, no, not really. Its final words, "No one will hold me captive, a serpent never dies," tells us everything. The serpent was held captive. It will never die. And when we find Tanith eating on him later, we know that it will soon be reborn through another host, continuing its original purpose. So the serpent is not just a random god-devouring creature, it's a blasphemous force that can consume gold, the very foundation of life and power in the lands between. And in doing so, it threatens to unravel everything Marika has built with the Golden Order. This serpent was sealed away under Volcano Manor, weakened and cut off from its source of gold, until Rykard found it and helped restore its power by feeding it heroes and tarnished. The godskin, tied to the Glomite Queen, have likely played a role in desecrating the ancient church of the Winged Serpent, all in service to this immortal gold-consuming serpent. But even though we seem to defeat the serpent, its immortality and Tanith's devotion tells us that it will soon rise again, continuing its cycle of devouring life and gods. However, we still need to answer an important question. How did this immortal serpent end up inside Messmer? In the other video, we'll explore these in much more depth. We'll dive into how Marika is linked to the serpent, the connection between the serpent, the shamans, and the gold, and what Marika did to the serpent to create the afflicted state of her children, like Messmer. We'll uncover how her creation in the jar led to these tragic yet powerful afflictions. So stay tuned for part 2. Thanks for watching.